And we welcome you back to Newsmax Now. At the White House as we speak, that is Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff addressing the media. She has having a joint news conference with President Obama. The president a few seconds ago referred to her as his partner and friend, taking their relationship and the Brazilian-U.S. relationship to the next level. No mention, I believe, yet of those spying allegations leveled by Edward Snowden. Remember that. You can Google it if you want. We'll keep an eye on this. We expect some questions on the Iranian nuclear deal, the Supreme Court cases as well. We have a team keep an eye on the situation. Meantime, we'll continue with our roundtable.
I'm not in a position to discuss private correspondence between the president and any world leader.
That's one thing we'd like to hear somebody ask about today at this news conference. That was White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest back in November of 2014 discussing, or rather not discussing, a private correspondence between Iranian leaders and President Barack Obama. Now there are new allegations, revelations perhaps, about an Iranian newspaper releasing this report. President Barack Obama sent a private message to Iran's leadership via Iraq's prime minister on the eve of a deadline. That was last night for these Iranian nuclear deals. We now know they have fallen apart, at least for now. The U.S. officials say the report of the president sending a letter to Iran is inaccurate, but it may have happened before. So that's a great place to start with our roundtable. And joining us right now is senior political contributor at Forbes.com and co-host of the Daily Wrap, Rick Ungar. Rick, great to have you with us.
You too. Good to be here.
All right, so we love to speculate about whether or not the president is corresponding directly with the Ayatollah via the Iraqi government there. But what does this tell us perhaps now about these accusations that the Obama administration is so desperate for a deal here? They just want to get something done. Maybe they want it too bad. By extending the deadline a little bit further, are we giving even more advantage to Iran?
Well, I think you have to make some separations there. It may be true that we want the deal too badly and all of that, but I don't know that the president sending a private letter to the Ayatollah is indicative of that. I don't even find it the least bit unusual. This happens all the time between principals in a negotiation, and the Ayatollah and the president are the principals. So I think we might be making way too much out of that. Now, as to whether or not we want this deal too badly, that's fair game, and it's a fair discussion. It doesn't look good. It's not going well. I think if you had to bet money today, I think we'd all probably agree that it's not coming together, and for good reason. There are some things that they're demanding that I don't think that we should be doing.
You reminded me of a report a while back after 9/11 about the Iranian government sending a fax to the Swiss trying to reach the United States. So these things have happened with different administrations before, but interesting and provocative to say the least.
Now, Rick, you said there are some things that you think that we shouldn't be doing. What do you mean, that agreeing to, I should say?
Well, this demand that they've come forward with, saying that they would not allow us to come onto their military bases to inspect them, that's a bit of a tough one for me, because I actually understand what John Kerry said. As somebody who's negotiated a lot in his life, you really do have to step back and go, well, why am I asking my opponent, my adversary, to do something that I myself wouldn't do? So I kind of get the logic of that. However, this is a bit different. This is a different circumstance. Given their track record, it is not crazy for anybody out there to worry that if we make their military bases off limits, it's absolutely nothing for them to move their centrifuges onto military bases, and we don't have a good reason to trust them. So the people who oppose the deal and aren't willing to give in on that basis, I have some sympathy for them on this one.
And to your point there, it's not like we're asking them to let the CIA or the FBI inside their military bases do these investigations. We're talking about an international agency underneath the umbrella of the United Nations, and plus this is not a bilateral negotiation. We're talking about the other world powers involved here, and I think that's often lost on the American public in these negotiations.
I think that's an incredibly fair point you're making, John. And not only that, I don't think it would be all that hard for the Iranians to supervise any visits in such a way that we're not going to really see anything that we're not supposed to see anyhow. So you make a good point. You do.
Yeah, I have visions of Hans Blix all over again.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will say that, even if they did give us a little tour, they're going to find some place to hide them, and they can't be trusted.
Well, the Weekly Standard's
if
Bill
that's
Crystal,
what they want to do, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, ahead, before everything fell apart, Bill Crystal from the Weekly Standard pointed out a deal in a recent report that could could doom the whole thing. The entry point, this is what we're talking about, isn't we must be able to get into every military sites because the United States of America wouldn't allow anybody to get into every military site. So that's not appropriate. And that's kind of what we're hearing on this talking point. But again, it's not the U.S. going in to investigate. It's the international agency. But we do need to make sure that there's some clarity there. Rick, we're going to ask you this.
Although to be fair to his point, I should say that the United States wouldn't want to let anybody else, no matter even our allies, come and inspect our military bases.
Right. That's to Kerry's point. All right, Rick, we're going to ask you to stick around. We're going to talk about Obamacare. Is it here to stay, or are there clouds hanging over the Affordable Care Act that could doom it in the long run? Rick Ungar is going to stick around with us. He's an expert on the topic. You may have heard he's a lawyer, too.
A little bit. Yeah, knows just a little thing or two about this, so it'll be interesting to get his insight on that. Newsmax Now will continue right after this. And back for part two of our roundtable, senior political contributor to Forbes.com and co-host of the Daily Wrap, seen right here on Newsmax, our very own Rick Ungar. Thanks for sticking around.
See you guys.
So the Hill reports that politics may be shifting, as John mentioned earlier, in favor of Obamacare. The nation's uninsured rate made a historic drop in the second year. Enrollment swelled to more than 16 million people, not to mention nearly 90% of people who have bought health care plans benefit from Obamacare subsidies, but there still are some cons.
So let's talk about those a little bit. Employers have an incentive here to hire part-time workers over full-time workers. Medical device tax is straining some companies, according to some. A $189 billion tax on health plans is hurting these small businesses, and fewer health care choices for small businesses as well. And there's also that 40% excise tax on those Cadillac health care plans offered to employees. Now, Rick, which one of these kind of counter arguments, the pros versus the con, wins out with the American people in the long run?
Well, presently, I think we know that the cons are winning out. I think in the long run, the jury is still out on that. The one thing, if we're being fair, that we have to acknowledge is this law needs a fairly broad amount of time to show us what's working and what isn't. We already know some things that are working. You did a nice job mentioning them. And we know some things that are a problem. This is where the politics has been so detrimental to this situation. Look, there are things in your con list, and by the way, your cons are absolutely fair as you list them. Those are all legitimate problems. Maybe we can question the tax on the medical equipment, because that's something that can be passed along. And frankly, a hospital that's going to buy an expensive piece of medical equipment probably isn't going to run away from it for a 2% tax. But otherwise, they're fair points. So in a properly working system, you look at what's working, you look at what's turning out as we hoped, and you look at what might be problematic. You go back into Congress and you say, okay, time to run this law through again. Keep what's working, see what kind of changes we can make to where there are problem areas. There's never been a major piece of legislation in the history of this country that didn't need constant revamping, every single one of them. But we're so tied up in the politics over this thing, nobody wants to sit down and do what's necessary to improve the law.
And it's become personal as well, too, right? Should you think it's time maybe that Republicans stop calling it Obamacare and referring to it by its actual name, the Affordable Care Act? You think that might help the very divisive political situation involving the law?
It's funny. I, as you know, am pretty supportive of the law, and I've called it Obamacare right from the start because I honestly view it as an honorific that someday, the president will be more than happy. So I don't think that's the issue. I do think it's time, though, that the Republicans stop using this as a political football to raise money on and to maybe get votes on, and start to worry about all the people in the United States and sit down and do what Congress is supposed to do, improve our laws.
All right.